Um, and so the session is, Should I be a bilingual teacher? And my name is Dr. Rebecca Heneise. And I'm a principal at City Language Immersion Charter, which is a 90-10 dual language school. And our target language is Spanish. So we're a 90-10 Spanish bilingual school. And I'm here to talk to you about being a bilingual teacher. I was a bilingual teacher for over 10 years, and now I'm a bilingual principal. So just talking to you about the process and whether or not it is a good fit for you if you are wanting to become a teacher, or for your students if you're here to learn about your student, if you're learning for your students. And so the purpose is to really to give you an understanding of the demands of being a bilingual teacher and like I said, the process of becoming a bilingual teacher and whether it's a good fit. So this is a little bit the roadmap of today's session. I'm going to spend a little time introducing who I am, giving you my background, because I think it's really important. You'll see it's part of the pillars of bilingual education to really understand your why and to really understand the importance of bilingual education and knowing that your culture and your context matter. Regardless, actually, of whether it's bilingual education or not, your culture and context matters because more and more we have multilingual students in our classrooms, whether we're teaching in an English-only classroom or whether we're teaching in a dual immersion classroom or another classroom. Our students are multilingual, multicultural, and so understanding your own teaching background is going to be really important. So I'm going to introduce myself, and then we'll talk a little bit about what exactly bilingual education is. And then we'll go over the pillars of bilingual education, and that's where I'll explain the hows and all of that of bilingual ed. So a little bit about myself, and that's a picture of me. I think I must have been around 8 years old. I grew up in Nicaragua. My parents moved to Nicaragua. Well, they moved to Costa Rica when I was 2. They were in language school in San Jose, Costa Rica for a year, and then they moved to Nicaragua in January of 1980. And I grew up in Nicaragua. We left Nicaragua in 1991. And so if any of you know anything about what was going on politically in Central America during the 80s, you'll understand that it was a very turbulent time. And my parents were somewhat idealistic. And when the wars started, they chose to remain in Nicaragua and in solidarity, and they chose to put us in um, public school, national schools, because their philosophy was we're no different than the Nicaraguans. We shouldn't have um, privilege, even though we did, white privilege. We were still Americans regardless. But they put us in national schools, and I grew up uh, fully immersed in Spanish until I was 13 years old. So I went to school from the time I was in, kindergarten till the time I was in 6th grade. And that meant a lot of different things. For me, it meant that I learned English at home. My parents spoke to me in English at home, and my language in the world was Spanish. And that is simultaneous bilingual. So I grew up speaking both languages side by side. And my parents were actually educators. So they were down there teaching they were teaching. And so it was kind of like natural that I became a teacher myself. I was always fascinated with language because because my father actually didn't grow up in the United States either. He actually grew up in Haiti. His parents were educators. My grandparents were educators. They founded a university in northern Haiti, and it's still there today. And so he grew up speaking French and Creole, and and then they were doing the same kind of work in Nicaragua, and I grew up speaking Spanish and was always fascinated by language. Um, and wanting to, just learn languages. So my background is this kind of like the values that I grew up with were these values of uh, solidarity, social justice. They were, education. My values were, I could, from an early age, understand the value of language and the privilege that language brought you. I don't know how many people told me, I wish I could speak Spanish like you, or I wish I could speak English like you, um, all the time, all the time. And so I understood the value of language. And I was often translating for foreigners visiting Nicaragua, or when I was in the United States, translating. So there was a lot of the importance of language in my life. So that's my background. Um, I came to LA and I decided that these were my people. Like I'd never been surrounded by so many bilingual, and it's such a diverse, multicultural city. And I decided that I wanted to become a bilingual educator. And I started on that path. And then I was, interestingly enough, the principal of one of the first schools that I taught at told me, oh, bilingual education it's passe. Like it's not, like you shouldn't get your master's in bilingual ed. You should really get your master's in reading. And I listened and I and I got my master's in reading. So I specialized in reading. And then a bilingual teaching position opportunity came up at UCLA Lab School, and I took it, and they hired me. And then I began my journey as a bilingual dual demonstration teacher, dual language demonstration teacher at UCLA Lab School. And at that time in the 2010s, um, bilingual ed hadn't exploded like it is now. Now, after the passage in 2016 of the law that proposition, gosh, and I'm forgetting the number. It's like 57, I think, Prop 57. It allowed for more bilingual education. And so suddenly, bilingual schools are just kind of growing, but that didn't happen until 2016. And so um, the lab school was an outlier school where they had a dual language strand and an English only strand. So that's where I began. And I learned what it meant to be a bilingual teacher. I had my multiple subject teaching credential and I was bilingual, but putting those things together what isn't necessarily everything that you need in terms of being a bilingual educator. Um, and so that's where I began as a dual language demonstration teacher. So I'm going to talk to you maybe before I launch into like, I want to ask you, like, what do you think bilingual education is? Like, what does it mean? Because it means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. So what does bilingual education mean to you, or what do you think it is? And you can just either unmute or put it in the chat.
I can share.
Sure. Thank you, Janet.
So for me, bilingual education, it's giving the student or the child the opportunity to take advantage more than one facet versus rather many avenues. And I'm only speaking about it because I myself am raising a multicultural baby, and I'm teaching her English. I'm also teaching her Spanish. Well, Spanish at home and English at school, but
Mhm.
I also incorporated a little bit of ASL because that's what she was doing in childcare. But the other part of her identity is that she's also Filipina, so incorporating that Tagalog.
Mm.
And so for me, it's she's in a stage like even I myself like am jealous because it's like wow, like you are going to be like a valuable person in society, and you don't know it yet, but just know that these gifts and these privileges that you're going to be growing up, it's going to help you out in so much more, and you're able to understand the world in so many dynamics that us as ourselves as adults may not understand it. And I feel like bilingual education is very essential, and I feel like it shouldn't be disregarded. If anything, it should be enhanced. And so that's my opinion on it.
Thank you so much for sharing. And yes, I do believe that three languages is a tremendous gift. Um, Yolanda says that it means two can teach in two different languages. Teaching and Kondwani says it's teaching and learning in two different languages. Elcida said it involves languages, but also culture and an inclusive vision of the world. Bilingual education to me is more a multicultural setting towards learning and teaching together. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Um, so the definition of bilingual education. So it's kind of it goes, you can call it two things. It could either be bilingual bi meaning two or dual, which is two as well. It's where students learn literacy and content in two languages. So you're not just learning the language. It's not just I'm learning Spanish or I'm learning Tagalog or I'm learning Japanese or Korean. I'm actually learning content through language. Um, the core vision of bilingual education is to move beyond simple language acquisition, like I just said, and it's a more holistic experience preparing students for the world. Um, and like many of you shared, it's becoming more and more the norm that people speak two languages. And so why not make that part of the educational process? Um, why not make it the norm rather than the exception? Um, so that's kind of where we're at right now in bilingual education. It's easy to say that though. It's easy to say, let's make, like in California, let's make it easy for schools to want to become bilingual. Well, that's great, but then you have to think about teachers. Like, who are these teachers? And in particular with Spanish and even the other languages, but the majority Spanish because we're in Southern California. I know they're big, depending on where in California, it could be Chinese, it could be Korean, or Armenian, but for the most part, the majority of bilingual ed is in Spanish in California. And um, great. Let's make it really easy for schools in California to do this dual language education thing. Well, there was a proposition passed in the 90s that said that only English could be taught in schools. So what did the teacher prep programs do? Like, you're a teacher preparing to become a teacher. You want to be a bilingual teacher. There's a new law in the 90s that was passed saying that English is the only language that needs to be taught or should be taught in California. And so the teacher preparation programs started gutting all of their bilingual classes. Like it became kind of the exception to get your bilingual credential or your BCLAD. And so uh, you can't just overnight say, hey, let's make it really easy for schools to become bilingual if you don't have the teacher force to take up those positions. And so that's where we find ourselves now. The teachers um, were, were never taught to teach bilingually. And one of the things that I want to talk about when I talk about the three pillars of bilingual education is this idea that you can be bilingual, which I was bilingual. You can have a multiple subject teaching credential, and that's great. That's fabulous. You're on the road to becoming a bilingual teacher, but doesn't automatically make you a dual or a bilingual teacher. Or at least it doesn't prepare you to, because bilingual teaching is more than just language. It's culture. It's understanding who you are and what you're bringing to the classroom. It is identity. It is so many more things than just language. Um, and so what I'd like to go now over is these three pillars of bilingual ed. Um, and again, like I didn't learn this in my teacher prep programs. This came all of these things I learned by being a dual immersion teacher, um, because my program was simply multi-subject teaching credential. Yeah, I took ELD classes, like you're supposed to take how do you teach English to second language learners. But all of these ideas I learned while I was a bilingual teacher. And the idea is you want to learn all these things before, okay? So that you're prepared. So the three pillars. The first pillar of bilingual education, well, I guess here they all are: bilingualism and biliteracy, high academic achievement, and sociocultural competence. Um, and I think the the areas that bilingual teachers struggle with the most, and I'll say this just from experience of working with novice teachers, novice bilingual teachers, the areas that they struggle the most are the sociocultural competence and the high academic achievement. And I'll tell you why in just a little bit, but they go hand in hand. So let's talk a little bit about bilingualism and biliteracy. This seems pretty it's pretty obvious that in a bilingual school, the goal is for all the students to be bilingual and biliterate. They develop high levels of proficiency in two languages through listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And there are different kinds of bilingual schools. Now, do you guys can put in the chat, like, what do you know about the different kinds of bilingual schools? So all the schools are trying to get bilingual students. We want bilingualism, we want biliteracy. There's different models. So the model that I teach at is 90-10. But there are different models. Does anyone know the other different models? Let's see. We can drop it in the chat. And I'll explain what 90-10 is. So 90-10 means that in TK in kindergarten at my school, 90% of their instruction in the daytime, in the school day, is Spanish. First grade, it becomes 80-20. Second grade, 70-30. Third grade, 60-40. Fourth and fifth are at 50-50. So Janet says there's an 80-20 model. It's very similar to the 90-10 model, but there's more opportunities for English. And in the 80-20 model, really has set aside time um, for bridging instruction. So there's bridging instruction built into many 80-20 models. So there'll always be, so bridging the languages would be looking at what we just studied for, let's say in like we just studied uh, um, the American Revolutionary War in English. Now we're going to go over all that vocabulary and all those concepts in Spanish. And that's kind of like the culmination of that unit. So that those are built in bridging lessons. So that would be part of the 80-20 model. There's also um, 50-50. Most LAUSD schools are 50-50, and it's set up differently. So in my school, there's one kindergarten teacher. She's got her kids. She teaches 90% of the day in Spanish, and then 10% is usually taught by the art teacher, the PE teacher, or, another teacher. Um, by the time they get to third grade, though, same teacher is teaching 60% of the day in Spanish, and same teacher teaches that 40% in English. In other schools, especially the 50-50 schools, they might have different teachers. So one teacher would teach exclusively in Spanish, one teacher would teach exclusively in English, and they would switch. So third grade might have like one classroom would have all of their school in English, and then in the afternoon they would switch and be with another teacher for Spanish. Different schools do it differently. There's also school that are where they're just teaching Spanish as a language, as a foreign language. Those are called world language schools. Their goal isn't bilingualism and biliteracy. So those are not the kinds of schools that we're talking about. But those schools do exist. They're called world language schools. Um, so we're teaching proficiency in two languages, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So this is where I said my novice teachers are tend to struggle is high academic achievement. And there's a couple of reasons why that is. One is that academic achievement, especially in a target language, requires the teacher to have mastery of the content in that target language. So I am unique in that I actually went to school in Spanish. A lot of bilingual teachers here, and especially in LA, went to school in English and learned Spanish at home. So when would they have had access to content related words in science, in math, in history, in all these different areas? And so a lot of times bilingual teachers are learning that language as they're teaching it. So it's very taxing. Um, and they don't have all of those academic words at their disposal. So that's one challenge. Unless you are taking a teacher preparation program in the language, the target language that you're teaching, it's going to be really difficult to kind of just know that content vocabulary unless you yourself personally take it on to just read in that language. Um, you're reading like a science book, published in Mexico. You're reading a math book published in Peru, Venezuela. And so you're getting the content, high academic vocabulary that you should be teaching. Um, the second reason why it's challenging is because and this has to do with socio cultural competency, there is always a natural or ingrained deferment to English. So this kind of like, I'm gonna stick to um, the content in Spanish because um, I'm so passionate about them being biliteral, bicultural. And so I'm going to be teaching social studies in Spanish using high academic achievement words in Spanish. Um, but the stakes are always going to be higher for knowing all of that stuff in English. So by the time you're in fourth or fifth grade, bilingual teachers feel, especially in public schools, they feel the pressure to perform in English. Think about all of our state testing is in English. Um, a lot of diagnostics, especially in public and charter, they take diagnostics like iReady, English. Um, so even though your curriculum might be in Spanish, the pressure to perform is going to be for English. And also, um, I don't know what the beeping is, if that's someone chatting, wanting to chat, or no, or something else. It's probably my computer. Um, and so it's really important um, to have the next pillar, which is sociocultural competency, um, to really understand the why of bilingual education and to really center yourself in your why you're doing this and to kind of keep those pressures off of you as you're teaching. And I know that that's really, really difficult for a lot of teachers, especially when they themselves aren't as comfortable teaching in the target language, especially at the high academic levels. Um, to keep the English at bay, to keep the demands of English at bay. English is the dominant language. And so English is always going to win out, if you will, in this culture, in this society. But if you have a strong sense of your why, like why you are doing this, then um, then you will be able to keep those pressures at bay. Not easily, but it's really important too to have a team, to have cohesion, to have a supportive administrator. If a school's administrator is very much focused on those test scores, and all state testing is in English, um, like forget Spanish the last, 2, 3 months of school for third through fifth grade. If that is the culture of the school, it's very difficult to have a faithful bilingual program. Sociocultural competency um, is what I shared at the very beginning, my story. It's the language, yes, but it's also the values that were instilled in me. Um, a lot of if you are bilingual yourself, you'll know that when you go into another culture, your mm, the way that you speak, the way that you stand, sometimes even your tone of voice changes. Like when you are in the environment of a different language, you become a different person. You put on a different culture. You put on a different way of relating to others. And so understanding that is really, really important for bilingual educators. Um, I want to take some time. So that's really what I had. And I really wanted to spend a lot of time just really discussing, making myself available for you to ask me questions. And also, I know that some of you are wondering about the pathway to bilingual, to get a bilingual teaching preparation, or to become a bilingual teacher. So I am going to stop my share and just discuss, take questions. I know I gave you a lot of information, but I was hoping that it would be general enough that you could ask me questions. So I'll give you some think time right now.
I have a question
Mhm.
regarding teaching credentials. How can you once? you obtain your credentials and let's say you already earned your bachelor's, how difficult would it be to, let's say, if you wanted to teach in another country aside from the US? Or
With,
what would be like the pathway?
you're saying with a teaching credential from the United States?
Yes.
So it depends on the country that you're going to, and it depends on the organization that you're going to be working for. Um, Even in the United States, if you have a teaching credential from California, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can easily go to, I don't know, Mississippi and teach or Pennsylvania. Each state has a different requirement for teaching. Um, so it depends. It really does depend. So depending on so if you're going to Guatemala, it would be, I would, if I were you, I would definitely investigate how Guatemala is credentialing teachers and what kind of licenciatura they might need for a teaching. It might be that it transfers completely. It might be that they would have you take an exam or they might have you take a few courses, but it really depends. If, for example, you're going to work for an international like an international school, they usually accept credentials from anywhere in the world. But that's an international school. That's different than, let's say, a national school. So it really kind of depends on what you would like to do.
Yes. Thank you.
Mhm. So just by a show of hands, how many of you are bilingual? You know, more than one language. Come on. Yeah, I was gonna say there's got to be more than just two people who are bilingual. Yeah. Um, how comfortable are you in your language? Like, how comfortable do you feel that you could teach math in that language? Yeah. Good. Good. Yeah. So one of the things that I tell, like especially when I'm hiring um, um, bilingual teachers who are interested, they have their multi-subject teaching credential, they're bilingual. One of the things that I tell them, first of all, in California, they just passed a new law that you have to have your B-clad in order to teach in a bilingual school. The B-clad is it's an additional requirement for bilingual education. You can get the B-clad different ways. You can get it by taking a CSET tests. I think it's like 3, 4, and 5 or something like that. For Spanish, that's one way. The other way is by taking courses, like extra courses. You can go to any, like Cal State LA does it, UCLA does it, um, Dominguez Hills, like any university is going to have some sort of a coursework to get your B-clad. Um, and they're all going to be additional in addition to your teaching credential. If you want to become a bilingual teacher and you know that when you first start teaching, then you should pick a program. And I know that Dominguez Hills has it. I can't remember if UCLA has it, but I think it does. Definitely Cal State LA. Um, Definitely Cal State Northridge. I'm not sure about all the other ones, but those are the ones kind of around here. Definitely Loyola Marymount. What you want to do is you sign up for the bilingual teaching credential, and what they do is they embed those extra courseworks that you would need for the BCLAD within the courses that you're taking. That's the thing that is kind of a bummer is right now in the teacher prep world is that to become a bilingual teacher, you have to take extra coursework and you have to pay extra. It doesn't seem fair. Um, it seems like you should be able to take the same amount of courses, the same amount of requirements, and not have to pay extra. So currently it's unfair, but I think it's becoming more and more fair. Like I think universities are starting to address those inequities. And definitely schools are addressing those inequities by providing dual language teachers with a stipend. So, for example, Click, we are the only dual immersion school in my charter organization. We have a middle school, we have another elementary school, but they only teach in English. All of my teachers get an additional $2,000 for being dual bilingual. So the schools do try to kind of mitigate those inequities in the teacher prep programs. But that's what you will encounter if you truly want to be bilingual teacher. You'll have to take extra, pay extra. But it's worth it. It really is worth it. Um, I, I believe with every fiber in my being that bilingualism, multilingualism is the future, and it is the great equalizer. Um, you know, language, knowing more than one language shouldn't just be, rich people's benefits, like you always hear about rich people sending their kids to learn German and French and Spanish, and they know all these languages and they travel the world. And no, like bilingualism should not be tied to socioeconomic status. It really is a benefit to all humanity. And it is definitely going to provide a better life knowing more than one language. Um, and if you know more than one language, you should be very proud. Um, and I think that's also part of the sociocultural competency is really understanding the power dynamics of language. Some people, depending on their background, especially in the United States, depending on their background, their outward appearance, they are like lauded for knowing another language. And then other people, other folks, especially our BIPOC folks, are put down for knowing another language. That's ridiculous. Everyone who knows more than one language is powerful. And, obviously that's why people are put down for knowing more than one language. They don't want them to know that they're powerful. So a lot of what I do is to um, my student population is 75% Latino, Hispanic, and then 20% is African American, Black, and then the last little portion is just mixed race. I try my hardest to let everyone know how powerful bilingual education is and how important it is for everyone here. And to really kind of, yes, English is dominant, but if you know Spanish and you know it really well, you're going to be that much more powerful. Um, and and it is a superpower. And I've talked a lot, so comments, questions.
Yeah, I saw some hands earlier. Oh, there's a question in the chat. if I'm currently a teacher in a K through 12 public school in California and I want to become a bilingual teacher in a public school, what are the first steps that I would need to take? I am not bilingual.
Um, so I think probably the first things that you would need to take is take a language course, choose the language that you want to teach in, and then start learning that language well. And then you can take, I would probably go through like a B-clad program to just learn what it means to be a bilingual teacher. Um, yeah, very possible. Um, yeah.
I have a question for you, Rebecca. Because you're on the employer side, and as you're hiring these bilingual teachers, I'm just curious if you have any advice. Is there certain like traits or character like things you're looking for or special things you like have them do that's different maybe from the typical like process that maybe new teachers get hired when they are in the hiring process. Yeah.
So I always ask questions in Spanish because I want to make sure that you are able to express yourself and communicate in the language of instruction. And so it's really important to have fluency in both languages. I'm not necessarily worried about an accent, that's not what it is, but it's the willingness to be able to take risks in that second language, even if it's not as comfortable for you, but at least you're willing to take risks. And so I'll definitely ask questions in Spanish, like usually my question is like, ¿por qué quieres ser una maestra bilingüe o un maestro bilingüe? Um, um, and that usually gives me, it kind of kills two birds with one stone when I ask why you want to be a bilingual teacher, because they're going to respond to me in Spanish, but then I can also see kind of um, their why. Why is the why of being a bilingual teacher is really important. Can you drop some links or resources to help me become a bilingual teacher? Uh, why don't let me just share my email with you, and then I'll share my email with everyone, and then you can, because honestly, I should have prepared a whole bunch of links and resources, but I didn't. Sorry. But anyway, this is my work email, and then my personal email. Um, and I'm happy to share resources with you for sure. Um, and so I've interviewed a lot of teachers who want to be bilingual who also don't seem to understand the importance of bilingualism and defer. And this also comes out in their, I always try to do a demonstration lesson. It usually comes out in the demo lesson, like they defer to English. And I want to make sure that teachers are able to comfortably flow in and out of the language. Um, I hired a teacher last year who had never taught in Spanish. She'd been a first grade teacher for 10 years, never taught in Spanish. But she was bilingual, and I gave her an opportunity because she was very faithful to the language during her demonstration, her teaching demo. And so she never once spoke in English, even if the kids were speaking to her in English. And so being able to just stay in the language of instruction is really hard, especially if you've got kids going, wait, what did you mean by that? Like, what did you say? it's really hard to stay in the language of instruction. So being really creative with language is important too. How can you show, how can you communicate when someone doesn't understand you? And how can you teach content to someone who doesn't understand you? And that's where the teaching strategies come in. You use visuals, you use repetition, you act it out, think about all of the ELD strategies that we learned to teach students how to speak English because that was so important. Well, those are language strategies. You do the same thing in Spanish. So yeah, I've talked a lot. Sorry. But I'm happy to answer any more questions. Please reach out to me, my email. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?